All
Right.
right. Welcome to the Domestic Draft Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. Dan, I'm curious what you're drinking today. Why don't you kick it off?
I have a beer up from LA. It's called Ogopogo Brewing in San Gabriel, excuse me. It's quoted as one of the first breweries in that town. Right, it's like Eastern LA kind of. And really, as brewers and owners, Jason and Ryan, they kind of got together. They have experience in San Diego brewing. So they worked at Golden Road, St. Archer, Mason Ale Works, and they kind of got together and they created their own little spot here in 2018. I'm drinking their mango wheat ale. It's got 5%, and it's just a real good like summer beer. Although like the label, when it tell you, it kind of looks like a little bit of like Tim Burton, Nightmare Before Christmas on there. But the flavor is really, really summertime. It's popping. It's really fruity, very easy to drink. I'm looking forward to finishing this whole thing throughout the episode since it is starting to turn. I know along with y'all out there in Illinois, it's like summer is here. We're getting into it. It's like the getting ready to be the dog days of summer of the baseball season. So that's usually where I try to like transition into like the lighter beers, the pilsners, and I'll start mixing in some of these like mango wheat ales, which this one is. And it's actually really good. It's got a really like tart start to it, and sometimes these mangoes like a blue moon, it takes a little while and to kind of flatten. It's like in the back of the tongue, but this is really tart to begin, almost like a sour, and it quenches the thirst really well. What about you, man? What are you drinking?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned in the Midwest here, it feels like summer and it has for the last few weeks. And so I grabbed a beer that I think kind of makes me think of summer whenever I drink one. It's a blueberry lemonade shandy from Saugatuck Brewing Company. Saugatuck Brewing Company is based out of Saugatuck, Michigan. And it's 5%. It gets a 3.63 on Untapped. It's a seasonal beer, so they only do it like, during the summer. But it's tart, that blueberry flavor. And if you're not familiar with Michigan and blueberries, they're a top producer of blueberries in the U.S. They grow over 20 varieties, throughout the state. But specifically where Saugatuck's located on the western side of Michigan, that's a leader of the blueberry industry because of the ideal acidic soils and climate along the lakeshore. So a little bit about Saugatuck Brewery. They're the oldest craft brewery in Saugatuck. Began brewing in 2005. They currently have 2 tasting rooms and an outdoor patio. One of the tasting rooms is called the Pub. It's got 16 taps, hard cider, wine, full food menu. And then the other tap room is called the Barrel Room. That's got an additional 15 taps, more of a laid back vibe. You can enjoy a drink and play some games like shuffleboard, bumper pool, pinball, things like that. But I did this one also because I just planned our first family vacation as a family of 4. I just had my second daughter a month ago. So we're planning our first vacation in a couple months here in July to Saugatuck, actually. And, I'm just really enjoying this summer weather that we got going on here. But our next guest, I'm happy to bring on. She's probably dreaming of her next vacation as well as she covers the White Sox. It is Alyssa Bergamini. She is an in-game host for the White Sox, radio broadcaster for the Chicago Bulls. Maybe a competitor here, a host of the Lyssin Up podcast, Alyssa. And you do a lot of things too. So I'm sure I missed some things there, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You guys really made me want to have both of those beers. I'm really intrigued by the blueberry thing that you said about Michigan, and you're totally right. Like the blueberries there, I just feel like something about Michigan, it's just so fresh, and all the vegetables and fruits, and going to the farmer's market. I might need to try this.
Pure Michigan. The billboards wouldn't lie
that's
to
why
you.
it's called that, huh?
I also didn't know. If you would have asked me the producer in the United States of blueberries, I would not say Michigan.
I know. That's good to know for trivia down the line. Hopefully that's asked one day. But thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
of course.
Thanks so much.
So just looking and doing a little research on you, you studied journalism at University of Iowa. Yes. I'm wondering if this was kind of always the goal. Did you know from like a young age that like sports was going to be it, and sports media and covering it and being involved, that was like always the goal, or did it happen later on?
I had a teacher in high school, my junior year, and it was my English teacher. And that's kind of, I fell in love with writing first. So I really, enjoyed writing. I liked writing papers. I feel like I was one of those weird students. And my teacher actually went to the University of Iowa. So I kind of learned about Iowa through her and the journalism program. So, when you're applying for colleges, it's so overwhelming. It's like, where do I even begin? So narrowed it down. I knew I wanted to go to a Big Ten university. I knew I wanted to go somewhere that had a lot of sports. There's the football, basketball. Iowa has really everything. I liked Marquette, but they don't have a football program. So, Big Ten, somewhere that's not too far from home. So, I'm from the Chicagoland area. It only was 3 hours away. I did have an older cousin that went to Iowa. So when I visited, I was introduced to the party scene as well. So that was fun.
That's usually how it goes.
And, and it just, I felt like it clicked when I was on the campus. So I think from there, I knew I wanted to do journalism. I don't think I knew right away I could do sports journalism. I don't know why it didn't click with me right off the bat. But then once you start taking classes and you network and you find your niche, I'm like, wait, I love sports. I grew up, like I said, in Chicago, paying attention to the White Sox, the Bears, the Bulls, just every team imaginable. So that's kind of when it clicked. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to turn this into a sports broadcasting, type of scenario here in college. And I worked at the student-run TV station, Daily Iowan TV. So it was very hands-on. So pitching all my own ideas, going out, shooting all the content, flipping it around, making a package, then putting that on air. So I learned early on that it is a difficult job, but if it's something that you want to pursue, that you have to just really work towards it. So I would say, going to Iowa was, such valuable lessons that I learned. I had great professors. The classes that I took were really pinpointed towards writing and towards reporting and towards speaking on camera. So I've just, have fallen in love with it since, and I just kind of have kept going ever since University of Iowa.
I always we've talked to a lot of people that are kind of like in the same profession as well, and listening to like the stories of starting out and some like assignments that maybe you went on that you like to bring up as like, this is kind of where I like cut my teeth and it was a crazy experience. Do you have any of those kind of stories where you're just like out in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, maybe reporting?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I remember I was doing a news story during like the holidays, during Thanksgiving, like right before we had to go back to school. Or go back home, for Thanksgiving break. And I just remember bringing my camera and my huge tripod into Target. And then I was going into like grocery stores. And I think the angle that I was doing, it was like the Black Friday shopping. So I was just going in these stores with this huge camera filming. And then they came up to me eventually. They were like, you can't do this. And I was like, oh, okay. And I already had all the footage and my teacher was so proud of me. She like kept telling everyone, she's like, Alyssa just went for it. She did it. Like I wasn't breaking any laws, but I didn't know that you could just like not do that.
That's forgiveness, not permission.
Totally. I live by that. So it was kind of thrilling. I wasn't doing anything too crazy, just getting in trouble at Target with a camera. So I haven't really done anything too crazy. I try to stay, within the lines. But yeah, that was just a good awakening to, oh, okay, when you have to get something done though on deadline, you kind of will do whatever.
Yeah. Whatever it takes.
So
whatever it takes.
And now, you're working for the Bulls, you're working for the Sox. I mean, you obviously didn't go right from your first job out of school to working for these, big teams.
Yeah.
I noticed you worked for the Schaumburg Boomers for a little bit.
Hometown.
Could you just tell us more about like climbing through the ranks of like the small town teams and how that process looks, and maybe if there was like a big break moment that you had somewhere along the way?
Yeah. So actually during college, I really took advantage of coming home for the summers and doing internships. So I interned at KISS FM, so 103.5. I interned at Fox 32 in the sports department, working with Lou Canellis and Deion Miller. These were all unpaid at the time. Yeah, they're all unpaid though. And now that's unheard of. Like you have to get paid now for these internships. So I was going downtown, weird hours, doing these internships. I'm like, I love this. This is craziness. And I am so tuned into this. And actually during college as well, I applied for a job with the White Sox it was called the Chevrolet Pride Crew. So their marketing team. So I actually started working with the White Sox in 2013. So I have been with the White Sox for 11 years.
Going on a decade.
I just never let go of them. So, I've had multiple jobs as you brought up, but White Sox has always been the one that I've stuck with through and through, and really climbing up there. So started out in that marketing promotions role, and then they were looking for an MC, an in-game host, and they were like, Alyssa, you went to school for this. You know how to talk on camera. And I was like, I do. So I kind of just got thrown into it and just learned along the way. So that was in 2017, started emceeing at the White Sox, but also that same summer is when I was emceeing for the Schaumburg Boomers. So minor league baseball, also covering, major league baseball. It was totally two different worlds, but I loved them both. And I really would say with the Schaumburg Boomers, since it is on a smaller scale, a smaller stage, when I made the mistakes, it was okay. And that's how you learn, is making mistakes and learning along the way. And I just remember having the audition in Schaumburg, and afterwards I was like, I totally got that job. I'm like, I got to figure out how I'm going to do White Sox and I'm going to do Boomers. And the Boomers won the championship that year. So I worked like the longest season. It was just a lot of baseball, really little pay. Like even games where I would go to and say it got postponed, I just wouldn't get paid. And I'm like, okay, this will eventually pay off. So that was probably one of the jobs where it did pay off at the time, though. It's, driving far, using all my gas miles, going over on the lease cars that I had, totally going over those miles. I'm like, you know what? It'll work out eventually. So that was in 2017. And just since then, I've just had so many different opportunities. A lot of doors have been opened. And Evan, to go back to your question, kind of a moment where I felt like, oh, I really broke through, made it in a sense. At NBC Sports Chicago, I hosted a high school lights show. So that was also one of my internships, was at Comcast Sportsnet, now NBC Sports Chicago. And then my first job out of college, production assistant, behind the scenes, printing paper, printing scripts, doing box scores, like the not glamorous stuff. And then, I think it was 3 years that went by. My boss, back then, he called me and was like, would you like to be the host of High School Lights? And it was the second highest rated show on NBC Sports Chicago. It was Blackhawks pre and post game, and then High School Lights. And unfortunately then pandemic happened. So I only got to do that for a few months, and then that kind of got shut down. But that was, I'm on Chicago TV, and that's really what I have been working towards. And that was just one of those moments where I just felt like everything clicked.
It's like a lot of great advice if people are listening to this, kind of like wanting to, maybe start in the industry, or like how to do it. It seems like, right, you just put in the time and you keep kind of, going, taking a swing at it, taking these jobs, whether if you think you're qualified or not, or if it's going to make you go over your lease agreement, you do it. You ask that forgiveness, you don't ask the permission. So if people are listening to that, it's good advice. I'm curious too, like you start to see yourself on TV, you're hosting shows. Do you have like idols within the industry that you kind of like hold up as kind of the gold standard that you would want to like, replicate kind of your career after or shoot for?
It's honestly the people that I have worked with, the people that I know best, and I've seen it firsthand. So going back to talking about NBC Sports Chicago, when I was a production assistant there, I'm lower level, and then the higher level is clearly the talent. So just to name a few, Layla Rahimi, she is one of the top broadcasters in Chicago. She does radio, she does TV. She is so knowledgeable, and just seeing all the hard work that she has put in. She's also one of my good friends, and from the industry, and she's great, as a person on camera as she is off. So Layla definitely is someone that I look up to. Sierra Santos, who now is at MLB Network, and she worked at NBC Sports Chicago. Kelly Kroll, who she is in Atlanta now. She has been covering the Braves. So just the people that I have seen put in the work, and people that have, kind of taken me under their wings without me even asking for advice. They understand that they were in this position at one point too. I've been able to shadow Erin Andrews for some Fox games. I was a production runner, and she was great to work with. And it just shows that, yes, she only has X amount of time, on camera. Like we see her do the pregame stand-up and the in-game interviews and the post-game interviews, but so much work goes into that. And I don't think people realize that as well. So I think the people that I am closest with, and the people that I kind of grew up learning from, those are probably my biggest idols. And, I don't think that'll ever change.
Oh, it's super cool. And just, being able to be close to them and bounce ideas off them too. That's just super helpful, especially some people that you look up to like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we're all in this together at the end of the day. So they've helped me, whether it's, if I'm starting a job, like when I started radio, I had literally no idea what I was doing. I never worked in radio, and Layla really helped me with that. And she was somewhat new to radio, so she shared any advice that she had, and it trickled down to me. So it just goes to show, those people that are the good people, that they're high up, they're there for a reason, because, they deserve it, and they're helping people out.
Good. Yeah. I mean, so, we mentioned TV. You've also gotten to interview players and former big Chicago athletes. And is there anyone that you were, number one, starstruck by, where it was just hard to get the words out? Number two, just somebody maybe that you haven't interviewed yet that you're just hoping to in the future?
So my recent interview that I actually just did on Tuesday, not Chicago based, but
Kevin Garnett.
Yeah. And I had it's hard the interview was 10 minutes. So it's hard to think about what I have 10 minutes with Kevin Garnett. What are the top questions that I have for someone that you can ask? There's so much on my mind to ask him. And the interview just flowed so well because he has a great personality. And I really brought it from, he played high school basketball in Chicago. So starting out talking about Chicago and his roots, and then, going directly to the NBA. What was that like? That is not what players can do nowadays, and what he thinks of that. And he just was mentioning, how he realized in Chicago, he's like, it was competitive, and that is what made me a great NBA player, and then of course asking about the current playoffs, and he was so excited about talking about Minnesota and the Celtics, and hey, maybe we'll see a matchup with that. So that was, a recent interview where I felt like all of my work that I've done on any other interview, it pays off, because when you listen to an interview, you want it to be conversational and you want it to flow. And when you have one shot with someone like Kevin Garnett, you don't want to mess it up. So that one, it went very well, and I was very excited about that.
So real quick, off camera, nice guy, Kevin Garnett?
Yeah.
It sounds like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Honestly, yes. Yeah, he was cool. He had this big puffer vest on, a hot pink long sleeve shirt. He had sunglasses on,
where was he? He was at a stadium, suite, press box or something?
He was at Soldier Field, and it was it was supposed to be in person, and then I think just scheduling got, things changed. So then it was, over camera, which was great. I mean, I think maybe it helped my nerves a little bit that it wasn't in person, because then you're looking at all the different variables, like how tall is he? And what does he smell like? So it was actually kind of nice that it was just online. And then in January, the Bulls had the inaugural Ring of Honor event. Yeah. So I was able to work the red carpet and kind of do the fun interviews there. So just all of those players that did show up, of course, the big names that didn't show up, Michael Jordan wasn't there. Dennis Rodman was supposed to be there, but the weather was bad. Scottie Pippen. I had all these questions prepped for them. They weren't there, but that's okay, because there were so many other, notable Bulls players that made those championship years what they were. I have interviewed Scottie Pippen before, and he's someone that starstruck a little bit, because just their statue and what they look like they're so much taller than we think. You can say someone is 7'2", 7'4", but then when you see them, they feel like giants.
And Scottie's got one of the best voices of all time too.
So deep, huge hands. I shook his hand. I'm like, wow, that just swallowed my whole hand. So he was someone that I would say, on levels of, athletes that I've interviewed, those are, top names. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I loved Dylan Cease when he was on the White Sox. I was able to interview him, Michael Kopech, two guys that really are so insightful, and any question that I gave them, they stopped and they thought about their answer before just going into it. So I really appreciated that. And you don't get that from every player. Some players don't want to be interviewed. Some players don't want the attention. So those were two interviews that I did fairly recently where it was very enjoyable, and the interview went way longer than I thought, which is a good thing. I got more content.
Always a good thing for sure.
Yeah.
What about people that you're looking forward to interviewing in the future, or maybe getting a chance to talk to in person?
That is such a good question.
Caleb Williams.
That'd be great.
I was going to
That would
say
be
Caitlin Clark, fellow Hawkeye.
Caitlin Clark.
Oh,
How did
yeah.
that slip
That
my
would be
mind?
insane.
I would love to talk with Caitlin Clark. You guys both gave me. I'm going to steal your answers. Caleb Williams, Caitlin Clark.
Okay.
Those would be
Yeah.
amazing. I'll take it.
We'll look forward to that happening. And just to kind of just go back right to the beginning, then we'll move on. But that Kevin Garnett
Yeah.
interview, like if you follow Alyssa on any social media platform, you could see where that is kind of linked, but it's on the Odyssey app. It's 670 Score was the interview, right? So just
Yes.
to make sure we get some traffic there, because I was looking at it earlier today and it's a great interview and everyone should go
Thank
ahead
you.
and
Yeah,
kind of
it's on
listen to it.
YouTube.
And yeah, YouTube as well. Get some insight from, one of Chicago's like best athletes of all time being interviewed by Alyssa.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the plug. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Also some of the things I noticed moving on with kind of all the roles you do, going from all the different aspects, but now like sports betting is legal in Illinois, and that is like a huge thing in game now. Like you're seeing even like, you'll say the score and then it'll say like the odds like right after it, kind of who's winning and whatnot. So like how much has that changed your job and prep work and like just a whole nother realm of, content and knowledge that you have to kind of prep for?
Sports betting gave me a job with 670 The Score because I'm on the Bulls broadcast, but I'm sponsored by BetMGM. So when I do a pregame hit, I'm giving out player props for, the Bulls and then opposing team. And I talk about either, the spread or take the over under. So I make it into, we call it wagertainment. So make it into a storyline, something that not everyone knows about sports betting. Not everyone, needs to, but kind of giving it and kind of talking about it in layman terms. So people are listening and they're like, okay, I understand what this girl is saying. So I actually didn't dabble in sports betting until it became legal, and that was in 2020. So during the pandemic, when I didn't have a lot of my jobs at all, I taught myself sports betting, and I reached out to those who knew about sports betting and could explain it better to me. So I just started during COVID tweeting a ton about sports betting, and I was tweeting about baseball and about the White Sox, and I was actually pretty good with it. And then I was too good because the White Sox said, "Hey, Alyssa, you work for the you work for the team. You can't talk about sports betting."
Was that like a letter or an email you got? And you're like, "Oh,
it was a Zoom.
Oh, okay.
I was like,
got called into the principal's office.
Yeah, this is our HR director.
Yes. But think about it. This was new to everyone. Of course, sports betting has been around for a while, but nothing, now you have to sign contracts of, I'm not going to be talking about sports betting when it comes to the teams that you work for. Now, since I am employed by the White Sox, that makes sense. Don't talk about sports betting with baseball anymore, but I could talk about any other sport I could talk about. So I was like, if I talk about other sports, is that fine? They're like, yeah. I'm like, so just not baseball. They're like, yeah. So then I pivoted and I talk about basketball sports betting. But it totally makes sense. And again, this was in 2020 when it just became legal in Illinois. It was new to everyone and kind of taboo, I would say. And even now, like I'll see some sports writers that have been around for years, and I'll see them at Bulls games and in the press conference, and they're like Sam Smith, who has covered the Bulls for so long. He's like, "You're the reason why that everyone's betting now." I'm like, I wish I was the reason why. He's like, "This is wrong." And that was like when I first started doing it. And now he's like, "That's cool that you do that." I'm like, I know. So people just have to look at it from kind of a different perspective. And, I'm not telling people to put all their money down. I'm just telling, what my thoughts are and to sprinkle a little bit of money. You can put money down. You don't have to, but it's a fun way to look at sports from a different lens. And even, a lot of my friends they're great about following, their teams and watching games. But it's fun to explain to someone, let's just cheer for this player to get 20 or more points. Let's just cheer for the total to go over 205. And it's unique because, you can cheer on your team, but you can also be cheering on the other team too. And if you're winning some money, it makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, not working for any of the teams left in the NBA playoffs, who would you say is your favorite to win? This is not
My
betting advice. Do
favorite.
not.
Yeah.
I don't mind giving betting advice.
Okay.
I do feel like the Celtics will take it all. They've had a lot of time off because they didn't.
Good thing or a bad thing?
That's true, but they've had a lot of recovery time too, and I feel like a lot of the players right now are just so beat down. I would love to see the Celtics and the Timberwolves. I mean, going back to the Kevin Garnett thing, yes, but I have a lot of friends that are from Minnesota. They're Timberwolves fans and a smaller market, so I feel like that they deserve it. They deserve to cheer on their team, to make it to the finals. But I do think that Boston really has a chance with Jason Tatum just to win it all.
Yeah. T-Wolves are hot. It's a hot
I
team.
know.
Boston sports,
Anthony
man.
Edwards
Get out
is great.
of it.
Right.
Bringyass.com. Go to
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's such good marketing right there.
That.
Yeah.
Such good.
Okay, so you mentioned you've been with the White Sox since 2013. Don't want to talk too much about the current team versus where they were back then or anything like that. But I'm curious about the fan experience and how that's changed since, when you started to now, and, how you've gotten to experience that yourself from being at the stadium all this time. And we heard about this new campfire milkshake. Dan and I don't go to Sox games. We're just curious how the fan experience has progressed over time.
I mean, for me, the best part about going to work is I end up just talking with everyone. Like my whole day is just talking. I love meeting new fans. I love, people are very respectful to me, and they always tell me like, oh, thank you so much for, coming here with energy, because, and that's really how I am to begin with. I have a lot of energy, and baseball's a slow game. I mean, despite the pitch clock, it's still slow. So you really have to keep the energy up throughout the total of the game, whether it is a cold game in April or a scorching hot game in August. My job is to enhance the overall fan experience. And I just, when I'm with the contestants or whether I'm walking around the concourse, I just want people to have a good time. Like, I know how it is to go to a game as a fan. And from the time that you park or the time that you walk into the stadium to the time you're in your seat to getting food, you want it to be enjoyable. Like, people are spending their time, their money, they're bringing their families, their kids. They want to make this memorable for their little ones, bringing them to their first game, a memory that they can have for a lifetime. So for me, despite what is going on the field that is out of my control, I wish I had a little bit of control. That is out of my control. So I just always bring my 100%, even if I'm having, an off day. I leave it all at the door, and I am happiest, honestly, when I'm at the ballpark and I have, great bosses. I work alongside great people. It's good energy, despite if there's losses or wins. Obviously, we want more wins, but for me, it's home, and I have a natural smile when I'm there, and that's when you're doing what what you love. Then you don't have, what is it? You don't work a day in your life, something like that.
Something like that.
And I do feel like that there.
Before we move on to the kind of last couple questions, we'll get you out of here. I'm just, again, I haven't been to Guaranteed Rate Field since I think like Frank Thomas was playing and I was a little kid, and my dad, my friend's dad had a ticket. How would you sell it? Like, we're both Cubs fans, but how would you sell it to people like deciding they're visiting Chicago? They got to decide, are they going to a Sox games or Cubs games? What does Guaranteed Rate Field have that kind of would draw you? I mean, you gave the family atmosphere and all that, but like anything else?
They have the parking, first off. There's no parking by Wrigley.
Little tailgate situation out there, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. That's a big plus.
It is. Honestly, like, I like going to Cubs games too here and there, but it's even hard for someone that lives in the city to navigate, like, okay, we're going to take an Uber and that's going to be expensive. But so it's easy, it's accessible, I would say. The White Sox knock it out of the park, no pun intended there, but I guess a little bit, with their food. I mean, year after year, there's something crazy that comes out, and you brought this up, the campfire milkshake. It is simply a chocolate milkshake with roasted marshmallows, but people love it. It sells out every game. They've opened it in some new stands. So I always, pitch to people, if you just want to have an enjoyable night at the ballpark and get some dinner, eat some lunch, if you're coming for a day game, just come and enjoy. That you can find reasonable tickets. You can sit wherever. There's no blind spots. at Guaranteed
Not
Rate
behind
Field,
any
which
pillars.
nope, which we know the Wrigley has a few of those. So
Mm-hmm.
any seat that you're in, you will have a good view and you will have a full belly by the end of the night.
There it is.
And
Signed
a good time
off.
if Alyssa's there. Yeah.
And a good time, and I'll get you on the screen.
Yeah, I want to shift gears to your podcast now.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah,
when you
up.
started that, why you
Oh,
decided
there
to
you go.
start it.
We
Oh,
got
you got some merch.
merch.
Are you
Yeah.
selling
Well,
that merch yet?
my nice friend Anne, who is a Timberwolves fan, she made this for me, and I think it's so sincere. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
my
super
cup.
cool. It's not Annie Costabile, is
No,
it?
I love
Because
Annie
that was your
Costabile,
first
too.
guest I saw,
Oh
right?
yeah, you
We've
guys.
had her on our show
yes.
too. She's fantastic. But I'm just curious about when you started it, why you started it,
Yeah.
and your future plans for it.
Yeah. So again, during the pandemic, I had a lot of off time to just think about. I was thinking about sports betting and starting a podcast, but
All right.
I didn't. It was kind of oversaturated at that point. Everyone was starting a podcast. I'm like, I'm gonna hold off. Did you guys start it then?
Yeah,
Maybe.
Well, you're
Yeah.
still going, and
Yeah.
it helps when I wish I did have someone alongside me doing it. You guys know it's like it's a lot of work. I mean, yeah, you're just like
Yeah. Keeps you honest.
talking in front of a screen, yes, but like the editing and reaching out to people, it's a lot of work. So I
Mhm.
really respect like anyone who has a podcast just in itself. So I ended up starting this in October, actually right after the baseball season ended. I'm like, you know what? I've been thinking about this, and really my vision was I have met so many incredible people through my multitude of different jobs, and no one has the same path when it comes to working in media, whether it's sports, whether it's news, whether it's entertainment, whether you're on TV or if you're a writer or in radio. No one has the same path, and there's so many different opportunities out there. And I have a lot of high school kids or college students or kids that just graduated college reaching out to me for advice, and I could give advice all day, but really it's up to you and the decisions that you want to make. And there's just so many unique jobs out there, so many different paths. And so far I've had a good range of people on, whether it is someone like Annie who works for the Chicago Sun-Times, and she didn't know that she wanted to be a beat writer right out of
Mhm.
college. Like we always talk about just how our paths we've worked a lot together, but also so different. And it just goes to show like she's doing her thing, I'm doing mine, and we just stuck with it. I've had Tim Sinclair on, who is the public address announcer for the Chicago Bulls, and he also does the Chicago Bears and Chicago Fire, and just his experience and how he got started. I had Chris Ackles on, who was my former co-host at the Chicago White Sox, and now he works as a speech writer essentially for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he also is the public address announcer for Notre Dame. So it's like, there's so many cool jobs out there. And I just want people to know about the people that maybe don't get enough credit or recognition as they do. And the podcasts have been great. I've made 3 people cry just talking about themselves. I'm like, this was not my intent, but
All right.
sometimes when you're talking about, yourself and just your journey along the way, it kind of reminds you of how hard you've worked, and just to be proud of yourself to where you're at. And, maybe it's not where you have a lot of room to grow, but it's good for people then down the line to go back and watch and say, oh yeah, I forgot I did all that.
Yeah.
So it's been good so far. Lyssin Up is the name, play on words with my name. People love that name. I'm like, that was the easiest part of this whole thing, and usually that's the hard part.
Right?
So it's been
That's
fun.
a little subtle flex there too, saying that you've made some people cry. Damn, we haven't made anybody
Yeah, I was
cry on
gonna
this.
say
We've been doing
we
this for a
gotta-
couple years. So.
3
Gotta
people,
change some
and I'm
things
like,
up.
what are these questions that I'm asking that's really, really tugging at their heartstrings?
Into the core of people.
Yeah.
But it's, respect somebody who does it as well. Like, yeah, it's a lot of work and you put a lot of time and effort in. And I'm sure just like the job, right? Even though you had that 10-minute interview with KG, you probably did days and days of research, getting ready and prep for it.
Yep.
Before we kind of close out here, is there anything you want to kind of plug or bring attention to? I mean, we talked about your podcast, kind of the career stops and where you work now. Anything else?
If anyone's ever at a White Sox game, please say hi. I always love when people say hi and just introduce yourself. I mean, I think hi and a smile goes a really long way. I've been filling in at Stadium Network, which is the studio in the United Center. So I am on their show called The Clubhouse. It's a 30-minute show, and it's about sports, and then we go all different directions. So you could download the Stadium app. You can watch it live there. And hopefully next year I'll be working Bulls games during this time, but who the heck knows?
Hope so.
We're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for joining us.
Thank you,
Again,
guys.
she's Alyssa Bergamini. She's the in-game host of the White Sox, radio broadcaster for the Bulls. And check out her podcast, Lyssin Up. It's on any podcast platform, I'm sure.
Yep.
Does a great job. Fantastic podcast. And thank you so much again, Alyssa.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. I need a beer now.
All right. Thanks again to our guest today, Alyssa Bergamini. Just a really nice, thoughtful, caring guest. And I believe, gave a ton of good insight to any people out there, any young people that are kind of looking in and what they should be doing if they're wanting to break through in the sports kind of media landscape. But that is our episode today. So thanks again for joining us. For Evan Bierman, I'm Dan Slowick. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com. And you can watch the show on YouTube. All you got to do is search up Domestic Draft and drop us a subscription. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.